Hello Ryan, my name is Craig Bennett, and today I'm going to get into a video on airspaces for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. Now, as far as things goes, that what I'm going to be talking about pertains to VFR, and also it only pertains really into the United States. I'll be using real world stuff, but when it comes to in-game, if you're flying in a different country, then you might want to just take a look at your country's regulations, but note that most countries copy the rules that we have over here. So real quick, on top of the normal airspaces that we have, which is A, B, C, D, E, and G, we got a few that I want to mention right here. And you also have a few tactics that you can use with this site. So I like the site for a number of reasons. Like, for example, you can go to chart, and let's say, for example, I want to click that. I can actually go and see information about, whatever, frequencies and stuff like that. But the big thing is depending on the area, I can actually get times a day of when the MOAs are active. And this is actually very important to note. So if we take a look at this, basically we got military bases over here, we got other things like that, and this is not within here. So in the real world, in the game, you really don't have to worry about this. Maybe in the future, and hopefully in the future it simulates this to some degree, but in the real world, these MOAs, MOA, basically this is a designated area for military to do its activity, to train and stuff. So fighter jets, helicopters, and stuff like that. And you can find the time of the day that they actually train by looking at the legends on the charts. Well, the cool thing is with that is even if it's active, so out, inside the time frame, you got hot or cold, and even if it's outside the time frame, sometimes you still get fighter jets that's flying around and whatnot. So if it's active, I highly advise, even if it's inactive, I highly advise you to contact the ATC for the base, if not the area, and that will tell you if it is a hot MOA or not. The reason why that you want to take a look at this is fighter jets can move extremely fast, and same with attack helicopters, because that's part of their job, kind of what they need to do, and you don't want them to whack into you. And I can guarantee it, if you go into an active MOA and they're doing their thing and they see you, they will make you a part of the training simulation. So unless if you want to have a jet come up to you, 50 feet off of you, it might sound cool, but then buzzing you and doing whatever, and potentially actually whacking you or getting you to see if you, and it's more or less seeing if you can freak out, just picking on you type of situation, then I advise you to contact ATC. Sometimes even still, if you get permission from ATC, and they say just fly through, there's no helicopters or planes or whatnot, sometimes even still you still get this, because military tends to play by its own rules. Unfortunately, a lot of places have been complaining about this for years and years and years, and hopefully this does get fixed. But unfortunately right now, as it goes, the ATC may not even be talking to the actual fighter jets and stuff like that. There may not be a direct communication, so there might be something out there that it's just not on their that they know about. This actually does happen. If you can actually look up reports on this on AOP in a few other places, and they even talk about this, where they try to get Congress and some others to look into this. But as it is right now, if you do fly through a MOA when it's active, you might get buzzed or whatever, but you can legally go through it. But make sure it's cold, and that way you're not going to be whacked side of a fighter jet flying through. And ATC, they will help you out flying below the activity or around the activity or where it may be. So they might say, oh, they're doing training simulations above 9,000 feet, and if you're like 3,000 feet, you're fair. You're good. So you don't have to worry about anything. But if you're up there, they can probably advise you to get around things, which is part of their job. So another thing that is not on the traditional thing is you might notice that these little orange patches, and it's pretty important. So if you take a look at the thing, I guess I didn't click on it. So if you take a look at this, it tells you that it's pretty much a no-fly zone. And if you take a look into the reason why, like it doesn't have it here, but you can just pick a look at news for the area. It's because the President of the United States is going into the area and campaigning. The President of the United States always has a no-fly zone over their head. It's pretty much these rules, so you can feel free to take a look at it. But it also should be noted that Washington, D.C. is pretty much a no-fly zone. You need ATC permission to go through the area. And also with Kennedy Space Center, it tends to be a no-fly zone at certain times. It's best to get ATC permission to figure out what's going on. And that's mostly so a rocket don't whack you or you don't screw up a rocket. Now, there is certain other areas like missile test sites and stuff like that. And there is other areas like right here that's restricted airspace. And you can get a radio frequency to call in to fly into it. Otherwise, it's illegal to fly in there, even with a drone. So that should be noted. Now, let's talk about the normal ABCD and whatnot. So if we take a look at here, we have A, B, C, D, E, and G. There is no F. So how this works is basically G is ground, E is everything for the most part, everything that isn't everything else, and then A is 18,000 feet and above, and then you got B, C, and D. So small air towers, you got D, and then you got C for small medium airports, and the larger, the busier airports, so like Orlando, they are B, and they can be quite massive. And it should be noted that each one has its own regulations when it comes to cloud and visibility. This is very, very important. So I'll leave a link down below to this. Feel free to print off or do whatever you want to with it. But basically, each one has its own visibility limits as far as it must meet this or better. So it must be that or at minimum. And it tells you why. So as far as here, you got day, nights, and it tells you like in day and nights and whatever. And then it tells you height and whatnot for visibility and this other stuff. Now, as far as here, if we take a look at B, it has to be clear clouds. However, with C, D, and E, with E being below 10,000 feet, so you have the 500 feet below a cloud, 1,000 feet above a cloud, and 2,000 feet horizontal from the cloud. So, yeah, a simple thing right there. And then if it's above 10,000 feet for Class E, then 1 mile, 1 statute mile horizon, 1,000 feet, 1,000 feet below, and 1,000 feet above. Where did they come with these numbers? This is a major thing. The reason why they actually have these numbers is because if you have a jet flying through the cloud, because you got IFR, and you don't see them, they don't see you, because they're going through a cloud, you ain't going to see each other, then this gives you somewhere around I think it's like the 40-second mark, but it might be 20 to 40 seconds, but I think it's 40 seconds to react to them coming out of the cloud, whether it's coming through the side, coming up, or coming down. It gives you about 40 seconds to react to these situations. And when they're below a certain amount, they should be, given speed. That's the reason why it's there. Whereas above, they can be flying pretty much at full speed. So it should be noted that this is the real reason why. Now, again, it is against the regulations for you to fly through clouds. But it should be noted that in cases of emergency, then the rules kind of go off and they're, given a blind eye to, because it's better for you to fly through a cloud than crash and die for a big thing. So that should definitely be noted. Now let's talk about this, and I like this image because it shows you a Class G where you got all around, and certain airspaces goes all the way down to the ground level. It's like a hole in a thing. And basically what Class G is from ground to 2,000 feet or from ground to 700 feet. So if we take a look at this map, we got, and if I actually take a look at the sectional over in this area, we have Class E airspace for 700 feet and whatever. So basically that's all that's saying is 700 feet and above to Class A, and whereas normal out here it's 1,200 feet and above. So that should be noted that this is just basically saying that this is a controlled airspace. The reason why it's a thing that's marked on the map is because in order to get in certain of these airspaces, you must have a certain requirement to go through, but Class E doesn't really have those requirements, but they want to make sure that you understand that there could be quite a bit of traffic in those particular areas. Along top of these blue lines, which is basically federal highways in the sky, and it also wants you to know that there could be quite a bit of traffic here. And this federal highways in the sky, by the way, are about 8 miles across. So, that's something that also should be noted. Just a direct protected area, so you know that if you go around that, then you might need to watch out a little bit more than normal to see if there's any traffic or whatever. So how do you recognize the different classes on a sectional? So we got Class E right here. It's just this magenta thing. And by the way, the thing on the side would tell you. You got Class D. This dotted line is an easy way to find that. Now it should be noted that you might have a class within a class. So for example, we got a Class D around here with the military base, and then a Class E around that, even further. And then right here we can see that we have a Class C airspace from the hard lines. And how this looks in the real world is this is like a upside down wedding cake. The middle tends to go all the way to the ground or to a certain area. So right here we got the top number, which says that it goes up to 4,400 feet. And then the bottom, it says SFC, it means surface. Whereas this other over here, if we take a look at it, this outer ring, it goes, the top part is 4,400 feet, and the bottom is 1,700 feet. So basically, if you're, say, 1,500 feet under this, as long as you're not within this inner ring, you're not in Class C airspace. But once you get into 1,700 feet or to 1,400 feet, well, you're in Class C airspace. And these big blue lines, this is Class B airspace. It always much bigger. And it should be noted that this is not as simple as that wedding cake thing. You can have one part goes up and the other part goes down and does some weird stuff. So like right here, we got the bottom part is 6,000 feet in the air. This over here, this bottom part is 4,000 feet in the air. This bottom part is 3,600 feet in the air. This bottom part is 6,000 feet in the air. So if you're in this area right here, if you're 4,000 feet in the air, you're going to be in Class B airspace. You get weird shapes like this, and it's just something that you just got to note if you ever fly around or through them. Now, why do they have these weird shapes, in case you're wondering? A big reason why is it gives the maximum ability for the planes to land. So basically, you don't want to have like an all-around circumference of Class B everywhere, because you got the small airports and whatnot, and for the most part, it's not needed in some of these areas. Because it looks like from here, the runways are straight up now, north-south. And what this means is this just needs to be lower here. And let me guess, this is going to be lowered, yeah, up here. And that's because it's just going to go straight north-south and go from there. Whereas you're not going to have stuff going from east to west. Or at least it shouldn't go to east to west unless it's a small aircraft. Even then, that's go north-south to either land or take off. So some side things that might confuse some people, I know it confused me at first on the sectional, is you might notice some of these things like this massive circle, and that's just saying radar. That's coming on the side, what the colors mean. It's pretty important for, if you're colorblind, probably have a hard time with that. But this circle right here, it doesn't indicate a airport, it indicates VOR, so you got VOR to VOR. It's just basically a thing that's there to help pilots navigate in the sky. And one thing you'll notice that, or should notice, is the highway in the sky, it is VOR to VOR the bulk of the time. Now, one big thing to note, if we take a look at Class D airspace, there is a height limit, and how Class D works is basically a cylinder going straight up. And in this case, if we had this block right here, then it's 2,600 feet in the air. If there is no block with a number in it, then it's 2,500 feet in the air. So in this case, if we're 2,600 feet in the air or below within that cylinder, then we're in Class D airspace. Now, let's say, for example, that if I had a minus sign in front of it, it'll say like negative 26. That means that it extends to but does not include 2,600 feet. And where you'll see this is if a Class D is right next to like a Class B or Class C, then the Class B will say, for example, be around like 8,000. It'll bottom level be 8,000 feet, whereas the top level of a Class D is about 8,000 feet. So it's basically saying that there is some separation there, and the two airspaces do not mix into each other, which is kind of handy because each one you'll have call to enter its own airspace. Now, what does it take to legally go into a Class D airspace? It's fairly simple. Basically, you call up the ATC with your position, altitude, and so on. And basically, they will just need to have a two-way communication with you once you hear your tail number. And it's not something like holdouts or holds or something like that. Once you hear your tail number, then you're good. It should be noted that with all these airspaces, if you hear standby or something like that, you have established two-way communication. So that should be noted. Now, as far as the speed for a Class D, its speed limit is 250 knots. Now, does flight following protect you from Class D? Absolutely not. This is one thing that trips a lot of people up. Flight following, and I'll probably get in a different video into this into itself because, interesting concept. But a flight following does not grant you permission to go into other airspaces. So you do need to get the airport's permission to go into their airspace. As far as Class C airspace, you need to again have two-way communication, pretty much the same as a Class D. One big thing before I forget is it's best to try to establish communication 20 miles if you can from the actual airport, and that way you get enough time to do what you need to do, because it might not allow you in the airspace, and if you're right on the edge hoping for it, you might be breaking some regulations, and that means fines or other problems. Now let's talk about what it takes to fly into Class B airspace. You must get clearance from tower. So what it will sound like is clearance into Class Bravo airspace, blah 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 blah. If you do not hear you got clearance into Class B, then you don't have the ability, or at least you'll be going against restrictions if you try to go into Class B airspace. So that leaves Class E. What do you do to get in and out of Class E? Class E, you don't really need to do anything. It's highly advisable that you announce your intentions and whatnot on the frequencies, but for the most part, you can go in, you can go out of Class E airspace without any problems. It's best to announce your intentions of going in and landing in Class E at the airports and whatnot. But as far as going into the airspace, there's no requirements there. So that's just important thing to note. Again, all this is, when you take a look at it, all that is these little bubbles. It's just to bring your attention to it's a heavy area that you're going to see a lot of potential planes, same thing blue lines, because all this other area, just like these little bubbles, it's Class E. So let's get into the last bit of this, and it's the restricted airspace. As I mentioned, this is a no-go zone for the most part. You have to get permission to get into it. But one thing I kind of forgot to mention is if you're on the sectional on the charts, you can actually see in the legend the information about that. And some of these restriction areas is only within a certain height. So for example, we got to the 200 to 1500. So if you're 100 feet off the ground, or if you're 1600 feet off the ground, you're not in that restricted zone. So that's something to note, is that not all of these is from bottom to top. It's just one of those things that you have to note. If you're flying with for VFR, you need to know these things. If flying with IFR, if things don't mess up, which normally they shouldn't, then you might be okay to go through the airspaces and whatnot. But as far as this goes, this is one big thing you might want to keep in mind. It also should be noted that a lot of these are not 100% like 24/7 type of restricted. If you take a look at, like, you got SR, so SR is sunrise. If it's SS, it's sunset. But it says the times, or it's continuous. Now, if you absolutely must do whatever you can to get it to go through a restricted area, because some restricted areas are huge and there's just no way around it, especially when you get into the west. It tells you here who to call so you can get permission, and you don't have problems happening. But don't assume that you're going to get permission. So, and a lot of times they'll try to help you out at trying to figure out a way for you to get around if possible, especially if it's a large area. An example of the restricted areas, if you take a look at this, we got this entire area is restricted. It's just too unreasonable to fly around that, and you just basically got to figure out who to contact and go from there, and they'll work with you. But anyways, as far as this goes, hopefully this helps you out in understanding airspaces. I might get into a little bit more details on the exacts of certain things, But if you do have any questions, feel free to leave that in the comment section. Leave a like, subscribe, share. Also, let me know what you want to cover in the future, and I hope you have a great day.